Hello and welcome to Inside Modular, the podcast of commercial modular construction, brought to you by the Modular Building Institute. Welcome everyone, my name is John McMullen. I'm the marketing director here at MBI. Today I'm talking with Stephen Shang, founder and CEO at Falcon Structures. Stephen is here to talk about the possibilities of container-based buildings, as well as to give us an overview of his current work as the chair of MBI's Government Affairs Committee. Stephen, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Tell me about yourself. What's your background and what's got you interested in building with containers in the first place?
Sure. Yeah, I do have quite a checkered past, John. I actually was an electrical engineer in college. I was probably the only one from my class who graduated who doesn't know how to jumpstart a car. But from there, kind of went into kind of high finance, consulting, different streams like that, and was chasing .com gold out in San Francisco. When in 2002, I had this eureka moment where I said, you know what, I would really like to build a real business, something that you can touch, feel, kick, and so we stumbled across the idea of kind of buying shipping containers because there's so many piled up in the ports and renting them out for portable storage. So that was my first introduction to containers.
Well, very cool. You do have quite the checkered past, and it seems like you have evolved a bit yourself over the course of your career. And so I'm wondering about your buildings now. Tell me about how they have evolved, because you've been doing this for over 20 years now. I have to imagine you've learned a thing or two. How have your structures and your designs evolved now that you've been working with them for so long?
Sure. Yeah. So when we first started out, it was all about just portable storage, right? And we even called them storage containers. And back then, nobody really knew what a shipping container was. So they all thought we were selling Tupperware or something like that. Mm-hmm. But we listened to the marketplace. And so as we started getting involved with renting out portable storage containers for construction sites to store electrical gear or, plumbing fixtures, we listened to the customer, and then we started getting the question, hey, can you build us job site offices out of these containers? We'd love to use them. They'd be ground level, highly secure. And so we thought, you know what? We know a couple guys could help us figure that out. And so we started figuring it out. And next thing you know, we were in the kind of job site trailer business and renting out what we call ground level offices. Now, 2008, 2009 hits, and I'm sure you'll remember we had the Great Recession, and about 67% of our customers were in the construction industry. So we had all these containers coming back off the construction sites, and we're like, oh man, what do we do now? We've personally guaranteed all these loans to build up a huge rental fleet. How do we get ourselves out of it? So again, listening to the customer, we were approached by a group in San Antonio, actually the Air Force, and they asked us, hey, can you build us a simulated village using these shipping containers? Like, well, what kind of village? And they're like, well, we need a Middle Eastern theater. We need to really, have some way to really train our troops against IEDs, improvised explosive devices. Mm-hmm. And not knowing what it was, we're like, yeah, of course we can, right? And so next thing you know, we're in the military training business. And after 4 or 5 years, we had built probably the largest container-based city in the U.S. It's a simulated city of 700 shipping containers out in the middle of nowhere in New Mexico. And then in 2012 to 2013, for the lessons we learned from that, again, listening to our customers, we started thinking, you know what, there's probably an application for container-based structures in just general industry, not just with the military. And we were starting to develop into more of a manufacturer than just a construction company. And we thought, you know what, we can take a lot of those lessons that we learned and really start manufacturing these. And so in 2014, 2015, Falcon Structures was born. And from there, we've really developed how to build structures using containers and build them efficiently through a manufacturing mindset.
That's very cool. Very cool. So you've built so many things. What's the first step in making a container building? Obviously, you need a container, but what needs to be done to that raw container, so to speak, before construction can begin?
Yeah, so different than traditional modular. And I think you're asking about what's the first step in manufacturing, not the first step in an ideation project.
Well, yes.
So what's different about a container-based structure is you're actually starting with the container, mm-hmm. right? You have the box. And in a lot of modular factories that I've toured over the years, you're starting with nothing and you're actually building the box using either timber or you're building it with steel. With us, we've bought the container, it's been used for shipping, and then we're starting with that. And so the process is different in the sense that you're not starting from scratch. So you have a head start in that regard. But at the same time, when someone builds a floor from scratch, walls from scratch, things like that, they can build in the doors and windows. We have to cut out the doors and windows and then reinforce the container structure. So if you cut something out of a container, it has to be stronger. You have to reinforce the structure so that it doesn't kind of fall in on itself, right? So that's the first step, is really what we call our hot work step, but really it's the taking the shell and to start modifying the shell.
What is it about the shipping container that makes it so versatile?
Yeah, I think there are a couple things about it that actually I'll talk about three things about the shipping container that make it more versatile. I think one is there's something about starting with a box versus starting with a blank sheet of paper that I believe captures the human imagination. So there's a book my wife bought for my kids. It's called It's Not Just a Box. And it's about this little rabbit who finds an Amazon refrigerator box, and you know where it goes. Next thing you know, it's a racing car, it's a burning inferno. And so instead of starting from nothing, we're starting with a big box, and it captures, I think, people's imaginations, right? And so you see a lot of applications using containers. I've been doing this for 20 years, like you said, and I'm still amazed at some of the things that come to us to this day. You know, in the last few years, we've seen people building swimming pools in these shipping containers. They're building vertical farms to grow crops in. They're building wastewater enclosures. I mean, it's just limitless. And I think it's because we all have that little rabbit inside of us, right? So that's the first part of it. The second part of it is from a very practical standpoint, containers are not as flexible in their dimensions as a traditional modular structure. Traditional modular, you can go 12 feet wide, 13 feet wide, 16 feet wide if you want to. You can go, 53 feet long, 60 feet long, 35 feet long. Container, you're stuck. You're stuck with a 20-foot container or a 40-foot container. They're all 8 foot wide, and some of them are 9.5 foot tall, some of them are 8.5 foot tall, right? And so you'll notice our taglines, think inside the box. We believe with these design constraints that it forces you to be creative on how to use that space, either through a single wide or double wide and all that. But because you're limiting your design discipline to that, what happens is you get much more creative ideas that come out of it. And then on top of that, what happens is you can ship these containers anywhere you want in the world. Because why? They're shipping containers. There's an entire global infrastructure that's built around shipping these containers all over the world, by rail, by truck, by ship, even by airplane, right? And so that's the second reason I would say it's versatile. And then the third and final reason, I don't know why this is. We've been doing this for 20 years, but there are people out there who think shipping containers are cool, right?
They do kind of look cool.
They're kind of cool. Some people like the industrial chic look of them. Some people think you're upcycling. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons. I'm not sure if that's going to stick. I mean, it's stuck for the last 10, 15 years, but yeah, maybe that's something that comes and goes. But because they're cool, people tend to want to embrace projects with them a lot more than just traditional construction.
Well, industrial chic is the thing.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned the possibilities, the imagination that it takes to really, use these containers to their full and growing potential. But what are the challenges behind really building with things? I know there must be some, and maybe it's just the other side of the coin, working within a confined space, working within, defined parameters, as opposed to having that blank sheet of paper. But I was wondering if you could tell us about those challenges, and maybe if there's a project that you've done that was particularly challenging and how you got through that.
Yeah, I would say we identified one of the big, definitely design constraints aside, because that is a challenge, and you have to be really clever in the way that you think about these. But I would say that one of the biggest challenges compared to traditional construction or even modular construction is we are repurposing a shipping container. And so if you're looking at getting involved in permanent modular construction, well, what's one of the things you must comply with? Well, it's the building codes, right? And in 2015, when we first went down this path, the building codes didn't know what to do about containers, right? You had this kind of real interest in the marketplace. You had all these different building code officials around the country. It was just this patchwork of regulations emerged. Some of it was duplicative, some of it was conflicting. And to build a container-based structure that was building code compliant was extremely difficult. And the main reason for that was these building code officials didn't know whether or not they were safe. Unlike steel that you buy from the steel yard or lumber, I mean, there was no traceability on the materials, because these things are usually built overseas. And so the question was, well, it looks like it's strong, but how do I know that it's going to withstand these kinds of forces or that the wind's not going to blow it over? It's like, well, they've been across the ocean, they've been field tested, but a building code official is not going to buy that, right? And so that was one of the big challenges that we saw in 2015 when we first joined the MBI. And that's when I got involved with the Government Affairs Committee. We said, how do we get containers into the building code, right? And there's a whole long drawn out process on that, but it was really through those advocacy efforts that led us to 2023, where containers are now being are in the 2021 building code, that they are being accepted by building code officials. And you see much more of a proliferation of container-based structures because these barriers have been resolved.
So thanks for bringing up government affairs. I wanted to switch gears to that anyway. You've been a member for a number of years. I was wondering if you could talk about sort of the mission of that committee and why it's so important beyond just containers.
Yeah, so if you look at MBI and all the different facets of value that it brings its membership, I believe that government affairs is one of the things that that MBI does amazingly well, right? And what do I mean by that? Is it really MBI is the voice of the modular industry, but what is that voice being used for? And so lobbying, advocacy, really protecting our market, protecting our assets, but also finding new ways to use modular. I mean, these are all those things that you're interfacing directly with the government or with the building code community, right? And so somebody needs to be that collective voice in order to do that, because, you know, a manufacturer out of Austin, Texas, trying to talk to the ICC, the International Code Council, they're not going to give me the time of day. They're not going to listen to anything I have to say, because, you know, I'm this little company and there's this international organization comprised of 64,000 code officials. But you have someone like MBI come in who represents the entire Modular Building Institute, and they go to the ICC and says, hey, look, you know, there's this new form of construction that's happening called modular, and it's really exciting, but right now the codes aren't written very well for it. How do we really drive adoption of that by improving the codes? Well, the ICC wants to do that. And it gets the attention of the International Code Council. And then once you got their attention, all of a sudden you can start having conversations with building code officials saying, hey, look, here's why modular isn't scary. Here's why modular is going to help you solve affordable housing in your in your area. This is how it's going to help you build more schools. This is how it's going to solve Maslow's hierarchy of needs of just having a shelter, right? And then all of a sudden it's awesome. And so that's why I got involved with the Government Affairs Committee, is I just see that it opens up so many opportunities for so many different companies, and it's just an exciting place to be.
Well, we've certainly had some success with ICC. I know we've got 3 standards that we've published, a new one, I think, just this year. So that's very exciting. On another note, I was wondering if you could speak to sort of the topic of the day, or the year, perhaps, with our Government Affairs Committee. It's the Davis-Bacon Act and the problems that its expansion could bring to the industry. I was wondering if you could maybe give us an update on that, how it's affecting Falcon, or potentially could affect Falcon, and what it could mean for other manufacturers around the country.
Sure. And just as a recap, John, of what exactly is going on with Davis-Bacon, I mean, I think before I was involved in government affairs, if you said Davis-Bacon to me, I probably would have said, yes, please, and I'll have a side of eggs.
Exactly.
Right. So what Davis-Bacon is it's I think it's a law, is what it's called, a law or an act.
It's an act.
It's an act, right? And what the act said is that if you're working on federal job sites, that you have to pay your workers what's called prevailing wages. And in essence, these are union wages, and it was developed 100 years ago to really protect the unions from having lower cost labor from coming in and working on these federal jobs. So a couple of years ago, when we were in San Antonio at the World of Modular, the current administration, through the Department of Labor, decided to clarify the Davis-Bacon rules. And they say clarify, and I'm saying these in quotes. I don't think the listeners can see me doing quotes, but it's clarifying quotes. And what they did was they said that it's not just the work that's being done on site that needs to pay these prevailing wages. It's work that's being done off-site as well. So really putting a target straight on the modular industry, right? And so if a modular manufacturer has to comply with those rules, if you're building something in New York and you have to pay the prevailing wages in New York, and let's say you're in Arkansas, well, then all of a sudden you're paying your guys in the factory a lot more than you ever imagined. And not only to mention the administrative burden of trying to balance that with everything else. And so our estimation is that this really impacts our industry in a major way on a couple of fronts. One, as far as just business, it's going to cause a lot of us not to want to work on federal jobs, or it's going to make the pricing of these federal jobs increasingly difficult because we have to pay higher labor wages. Mm-hmm. So I think the current estimates is that it would have a 20% hit on our industry, going from about $12 billion a year to $10 billion a year. That's substantial, right?
It's a chunk.
That's a huge chunk. And not to mention, this is the federal Davis-Bacon, and there are a bunch of mini Davis-Bacons that are in the different states where they mirror kind of what's happening on the federal level. And so then all of a sudden these state programs see it as being clarified, in quotes, and then they start adopting this. Well, that starts to affect the local. And so I don't think that $2 billion drop takes that into account. So then you see even a bigger drop, but then it impacts the marketplace. Affordable housing becomes less affordable. Schools become more expensive, right? So it has this ripple effect that it really, it just doesn't work. And so what we've been working on the Government Affairs Committee is how to work with the current administration and educating them that this clarification really is not beneficial for the constituents, for the citizens, but it's actually very detrimental on multiple levels. And that's one of the things we've really been working on the last couple of years.
And I know MBI has done its best to sort of get the word out. We're having this conversation. I've had conversations prior with our executive director and other people about the Davis-Bacon Act and its expansion. But if you're a manufacturer or if you are in the industry and you're hearing this for the first time, what can people do to get involved if they want to oppose the expansion of the Davis-Bacon Act?
Yeah, definitely. Great question. So there are a couple of different ways a manufacturer can help, right? One is because we are all over the U.S., you can definitely contact your local representative, U.S. House representative, or your local senator, right? For the longest time, this clarification was bottled up in the executive branch. But based on recent efforts, we've been able to get it to the legislative branch, and the legislative branch is actually paying some attention to this. We had a couple of MBI government affairs members represent us in going to DC to talk to the different staffers that were tasked with understanding this issue. And they did a great job educating them, but that's not it. I mean, we need to educate as many representatives as we can. We need to educate as many senators as we can. And being that we're so geographically dispersed, we can actually make a difference by talking to our local guys, because we are big employers in the areas where our factories are. Mm-hmm. So that's one way. The other way is really working with MBI with the Regulatory Relief Fund. So we've definitely set that up. I know all the members of the board have contributed to this Regulatory Relief Fund, and we've been able to use that to hire some very high-powered lobbyists in DC to help us strategize and figure out how to navigate this. But that money is continuing to be spent. And so contributing to that Regulatory Relief Fund, that helps a great deal as well.
I think it was a great sort of Davis-Bacon in a nutshell. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Switching gears just a little bit, you mentioned this bomb dropped at World of Modular. You've been at World of Modular for many years. This past year, just a month or so ago, it seems like so much longer than that ago, but it really wasn't. It was about a month. Yeah. Can you tell me about your presentation? It had to do a lot with what we were talking about earlier with containers, with building codes. I was wondering if you could give us a gist of that presentation for those who may have missed it.
Sure. And just to plug for World of Modular, we started going to World of Modular in, I think it was like 2015 or 2016. And it was at the Bellagio like it was this past year. But there were maybe 500-600 people there, right? It was still a pretty small conference. And there was some buzz, but it was like, okay, this is nice. And, you spend some time around the pool and all that. This World of Modular in 2023 was also at the Bellagio, and it was just gangbusters, right? 1,500 attendees. 1,500 people. Record for MBI. There was no time to go sit around the pool. I mean, it was session after session, networking after networking. It was absolutely amazing. And the energy and the enthusiasm around the modular industry, it was just unbelievable. So if you missed it, definitely try to make it next year for 2024's World of Modular in Orlando. But it was really quite the event.
Well,
And so
I'll take the plug. Thank you very much. We'll be in Orlando next year.
definitely. But as far as my presentation goes, this was probably the 5th or 6th year I've given it. And so it was really an update on container-based structures and how to build safe container-based structures that are in compliance with the building code and all the different tools that are available out there for manufacturers and builders to use the building code to make code compliant structures. I have promised to the people who have attended my presentation for the last 6 or 7 years that next year it'll be a little bit different, actually a lot different. It needs a refresh, and we'll have new jokes. I won't be telling the same jokes over and over, but it'll be some more cutting edge stuff on container-based structures. But this last presentation was really around what's the code environment, how has it evolved, and how has it embraced container-based structures.
Very good, very good. Well, now that we're back on the container train, I have a couple more questions for you about containers. You've done a variety of projects. You mentioned earlier you built a city. You've done offices for construction sites and everything in between. Is there a potential for containers that hasn't yet been realized? Is there an idea out there that could be perfect for containers that you haven't seen done yet?
Without a doubt. I think we're just seeing the beginning of this container-based structure trend. In fact, I think we're seeing the beginning of modular as a whole, because right now modular is only 6% of construction.
Yep.
And that's up from 2.5% 5-6 years ago, but still growing. And so one of the things I've seen about this marketplace that's just been fascinating is going back to that rabbit. I mean, we don't have an R&D department at Falcon where we sit around and think about, oh, wow, we could do this with a container, or we could do that with a container. These ideas come from the marketplace, right? People come to us saying, hey, have you ever thought about doing XYZ with a container? And you know, fortunate for me, I have a team who is full of problem solvers, and they're used to saying, yeah, let's think about that. Let's give it a try, right? And so I think there's so many uses that we have not even uncovered yet. I don't think we've seen all the ideas yet. And so, yeah, I'm really excited about the future of this part of the industry for sure.
What would you tell someone who's looking to get into building with containers, who shares your enthusiasm for the industry and wants to start, but really doesn't have a clue where to begin? What would you tell that person?
Yeah, so I would tell them several things. One is, if you've read that Yahoo article that talks about this beautiful custom home that you can build out of $2, containers or whatever it was, don't believe everything you read on the internet. The cost savings aren't that dramatic. It can be good, but not necessarily, right? So I would say first, set your expectations correctly. I would say second, there are a lot of good thinkers out there around containers, a lot of good resources. And just because you can draw it on Google SketchUp, don't believe that that's what you can build either, right? So you see a lot of container-based structures that are cantilevered in different ways, that have wide openings, and it's like, wow, how in the world did they reinforce that? I would reach out to either a manufacturer who's been there, done that, or a design professional, and we have quite a few members in MBI that are great design professionals that can advise as to whether or not something is practical and whether it's constructible before you go too far down that path. And then third, I would really do my due diligence on kind of the code environment, right? We have made a lot of strides in that area, but just sitting down with your local building code official and saying, hey, look, this is what I had in mind. What do you think? And really making them included in that process. I would say those three things would be kind of the way that I would get started, just to make sure that it's worthwhile to go down this path.
Very good. Very good. So what's next for you? And what's next for Falcon? Are there any exciting projects on the horizon?
Yeah, we've got multiple projects on the horizon that I'm super excited about. I don't think we have enough time to talk about all those today.
That's all right.
But just this past year, we doubled our footprint of our manufacturing facility, continue to grow. And I think it's because we're seeing kind of the convergence of two major trends. One is the modular industry continues to grow. So we're catching that. And then the use of containers in that part of the modular industry is awesome, right? Because we've been able to clear a lot of the obstacles with building code. So for me, it's like, what else can we do? What other projects can we take on that are fun and exciting, and, working with interesting people? But then on the MBI front, I'm super excited for the next several years for MBI as well. We just celebrated our 40th anniversary. Kudos to MBI. And I think the next 10 years are going to be some of the most exciting years that MBI sees in its history, with just the acceleration of adoption of modular construction, but also with a lot of the technology tools that we're seeing that are coming to play that are making it more affordable, helping people think through it better. And just the sophistication of players who are in this space continues to grow at an exponential rate. So it's just such an exciting time. I'm really excited about what's to come.
Well, Stephen, I really appreciate your time today. It's great to dive into the world of containers. Again, I think it's fascinating. I do like the industrial chic vibe. I count myself among those people who like houses designed that way. And I guess I'll have to get rid of my my SketchUp that had 4 and it was completely empty inside. And oh well. But thank you for your time today. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to seeing you at the board retreat next week.
Thank you, John, for doing this. It's a lot of fun.
My name is John McMullen, and this has been another episode of Inside Modular, the podcast of commercial modular construction. Until next time.